Just take a minute and look at us. Open your heart and we will gain your trust. And when you choose us, we'll see you through. And 4 years later, they'll be looking at you. You can find us.
Hello and welcome to News from the Hill. Of course, on this program, we highlight the positive things that are going on the beautiful campus of Alabama A&M University. But we also reach out into the community, into the state, and into the nation with our guests. I'm Elizabeth Sloan-Ragland, and today we are going to talk to two guests who are inventors, who are engineers. And of course, I'm excited about talking to someone who has appeared on How I Made My Millions. So I'm going to let our guests tell you who they are, a little bit about themselves, and then we are going to talk about some special things that are going on the Hill, as well as in their lives. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Okay, we'll start with you. Tell us again who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Well, Liz, thanks for having me back. I'm Chance Glenn. I'm the Dean of the College of Engineering, Technology, and Physical Sciences here at Alabama A&M. And we're here to talk about something particularly special, and special today. And so we're all excited and a little bit of buzz about it, and we're looking forward to it.
Well, I know that you all are planning a speakers series over in the College of Engineering. And how did you come up with this idea, and what do you hope to accomplish?
Well, for the year, the theme in our college is about elevation. And it really is taking everything that we do, that is from the educational side, research side, connecting with our students, faculty, staff, the community at large. We want to take that to a higher level. That's the idea. And in doing that, there's a number of ways, but one of which is to create a forum for sharing ideas, community, reaching out to the community. And you know, there's two things that happen. One, new ideas are birthed and are shared, but also the community is more deeply engaged with the campus. And that synergistic relationship that should exist between an educational institution and a community around it starts to happen. This area in Huntsville area is vibrant in that type of regard, so we want to take advantage of that. That's what it's all about.
Okay, and so we're starting the speaker series, and we have a special guest who is kicking off that series.
That's right. And this is the first one. It's going to be a monthly series, and I can't think of any better way to kick this off than to have Lonnie Johnson here, a prolific. I'll let him talk about himself. I don't have to do it for him, but we're really just so honored to have him here on campus.
Wonderful. And now to our special guests.
We begin a regular monthly feature called How I Made My Millions. We went to Atlanta and met a man named Lonnie Johnson, who had once worked as an engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. What he did next made him wealthy beyond his wildest dreams.
Well, this is my laboratory.
Johnson was experimenting on a new kind of heat pump in his bathroom, of all places, when a blast of water suddenly shot out of a nozzle.
And the stream of water was so powerful that it set up air currents in the bathroom, and I thought to myself, geez, this would make a neat water gun. And at that point, I decided, well, you know, why don't I put the high-tech science stuff on hold for a while and go work and see if I could develop a toy, something that anybody could appreciate. So it was about a year later that I actually had my first working gun, and that was basically how the Super Soaker came to fruition.
Pulling the trigger actually opens the valve and allows the compressed water to go from the tank into the nozzle like this.
Of course, I wanted to create a business around this. I was going to manufacture it and sell it and make a whole bunch of money.
After 7 years and a lot of rejection, Lonnie found a company, Laramie Toys, that was willing to market his squirt gun on steroids.
It was in 1989 when I first met the people at Laramie. We started working together to implement a production model, something that could be manufactured. A few months later that I saw the final gun, it was just exciting for me to see that the thing was really turning into a product that was going to go to the market. The problem then became one where we were talking about a gun that was basically about $10 to $14. And people were used to paying $1 or $2 for a water gun. There was no advertising. We put them in the stores and then we watched to see what happened, and they just blew out right away. I started to see the royalty check start to ramp up, and I got my first really interesting check, and I looked and I said, wow, this is doing okay. Laramie was being pushed to run TV commercials. The gun was put on TV and it blew out again. The demand was so much, the production companies could not keep up with it. And then I got my next royalty check where I had to stop and sit down because it was a lot more than, and when I saw it, I realized my life had changed permanently.
Did it ever? Johnson's gamble paid off big time to the tune of $1 billion in sales and counting. Assuming an inventor's royalty of a few percent, Lonnie's paycheck to date is in the very cushy neighborhood of $20 million.
I knew Super Soaker from the beginning would be a great toy, but in terms of how that translated into dollars, I was just not prepared for it. So I had to sit down for a few minutes and kind of realize the potential impact that that would have on my life.
What did Lonnie Johnson do with his millions? He bought something he'd always dreamed of, a new lab. He returned to his roots and dove back into serious scientific research.
Tell us, we know your name, but tell us again a little bit about your background. And then we're going to talk about the series, your inventions, and your patents.
Well, thank you, first off, for the opportunity to come. It's always an honor to visit one of the historic campuses in our country and one of the campuses that has done so much for our people. I am an inventor. I guess the thing that most people know me for is the creation of the Super Soaker water gun.
Yes.
I have done a number of things over my professional career. I'm a nuclear engineer by training. I've worked on a number of advanced technology systems, particularly for the military and NASA. Worked on the Galileo spacecraft, the stealth bomber, the Voyager space system, the Mars Observer mission. Unfortunately, that one was lost during the orbit insertion burn-in, going into orbit around Mars. But it's one of those things that you really put a lot into, and feel very good about the accomplishments that you've experienced. I have over 100 patents. Inventing is what I do.
Well, let's talk about going from the nuclear engineer to the Super Soaker first. Everybody can relate to the Super Soaker. What was your inspiration to invent the Super Soaker?
Well, I was actually experimenting on a new type of heat pump. I had this idea that I wanted to develop a air conditioner system that would use water as a working fluid instead of Freon, because Freon and hydrocarbons are bad for the environment, and I wanted to have an environmentally friendly fluid inside the air conditioning unit that would be the what's called a working fluid in engineering terms. So this was a personal project that I was working on at home. I had a little machine shop, and I would make parts and so forth. And I had made this little nozzle. I was using what's called a jet pump because I wanted to use a jet pump to compress the water vapor. And had hooked this jet pump to the bathroom sink at my home, and had a nozzle on there, and it shot a high velocity stream of water, and I just inadvertently turned and shot the stream of water across the bathroom into the bathtub, and I thought, geez, this would make a really neat water gun, just looking at how powerful the stream of water was. So I said, well, I think that with my professional training, I ought to be able to design a high-performance water gun. So I decided to go to work on it.
I'm curious from that point. Yeah, and I guess this is, a point for any invention. It's one thing if you have this idea and you kind of have this prototype and it works, and even getting a patent, but how does it become that idea of you doing something in your bathtub to people all across the nation or the world using it? How does it go to that point?
Well, I think of inventions, and really good ones, as planting a seed. And if it's really good, it will grow and blossom and take on a life of its own. Sometimes cultivating it is easier said than done, because when you have an idea, it's not always obvious to everyone what the potential of the idea might be. So I spent literally, after I built the first water gun and got the first working prototype going and started trying to get someone else interested in it. At one point I was going to manufacture it myself. That didn't work out because I didn't have enough money to set up a factory and set up the manufacturing tools and all of that. So I realized that I had some things to learn, so it became a different project of one of educating myself so I could achieve the goal that I had in mind. And so it just became that. I started looking in places where people had successes. Clearly the toy industry manufactured products that were very similar to what I wanted to do, so I figured that they knew some things that I didn't know, and so I went and started talking to people in the toy industry. I submitted the idea to a number of them. A number of them turned it down. I got some traction with a couple of them. They, for whatever reason, ran into problems. It literally took 7 years from the time I got the idea, or actually got my first prototype, to when I actually met a company that could execute and would follow through with the project. There were a number of false starts along the way. I had deals in place with other companies that just didn't work out. So it's, I guess when you sum it all up, it's more of a story of perseverance than it is anything else.
Interesting.
Now,
It's not, there's no magic.
okay. How soon did you get a patent filed for this?
Well, I filed my first patents early on. My very first patent I got, a few years before that. And it was an interesting experience because as it gets back to what I was saying about teaching yourself and learning what you don't know. I had gone to the library, gotten a book about patents, and drafted up a patent application based on what I understood from the book. I was in the military at the time, and so before thought I was all ready to submit it to the patent office. So the Air Force actually had a patent attorney on staff, and I decided to go talk to him before I submitted it. And he looked at it and he says, you send this to the patent office, they'll send it back to you with one of their form letters saying, get yourself a patent attorney. So, and he literally offered to write the patent for me. And I said, no. I said, I want to know how to do this. And so he became my teacher. I would write a draft, have him review it. He would critique it, tell me what was wrong. I'd go back and fix it. And he gave me some rules and a framework that I could use and actually put in the application together. The patent office will allow you to prosecute a patent yourself. You don't have to have an attorney, just like you can go to court on your own without an attorney.
But it's not advised.
But it's not advised.
Right. So your client may not give you the best advice.
Yeah, I won't say what the expression is. I think you know it.
Yes. Now, you have over 100 patents. I mentioned that. Tell us about how does one discipline, I guess, oneself to come up with over 100 patents?
Well, I think the problem is maybe a lack of discipline.
Lack of discipline?
But no, yeah, the process, at one point, well, actually, now I have a company. I have a number of scientists. I have more ideas than I can keep up with, literally. And so I have people to help me with the ideas. And so it allows me to do things a lot faster. a number of the patents, for example, are for toys. I had a full model shop and machine shop where we literally prototyped one-of-a-kind toys when I had an idea of how something would work or so forth. And the idea, for example, for the Super Soaker, there are, I don't know, close to 20 patents in that space. Because the strategy was to put the invention out there, but also to make sure you put a nice wall around it to protect it. So to make sure that you covered a full spectrum of possible toy designs that could, even those that could compete with you, you wanted to have as much protection as you could to, and that's the way you keep control of it, because even with all of that, people will eventually find a way around the patent. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is technology, which is continuing to change and evolve, and it never stays the same. So the only way to really stay abreast, as we all know, is to continue to create, continue to invent. I think the iPhone is a good example of that. It's version 1, 2, it just keeps coming. Because if they were to stop doing that, then one of their competitors would come out with the next generation, and all of a sudden they're dominating the market. The same thing in the toy industry. We'd come out with new water guns every year because as the older ones, people got used to them. You needed something new to be excited about. So you just don't leave the door open for anybody to edge in on your space. And that's a business strategy.
I'm kind of curious what you think is, you talk about inventions or new ideas, you hear people express it as the next big thing. What do you think is important coming down the line?
In terms of inventions, and my philosophy is need is the mother of invention. You need a problem to solve. If you want to, I did a lot in toys, obviously, but toys to a large extent, it's subjective. It's a lot about marketing hype and things like that, but it's more of an art. I compare it to a song or a hit song. It's hard to know what people are going to get excited about. Right. Clearly, the water gun is something that's been around for a long time and people enjoyed it. So taking that to another level of performance was in some sense a no-brainer, because I always knew that Super Soaker would be a success. The magnitude of success I couldn't gauge, because it certainly has been quite a ride for me personally. But I always felt that it was a good invention that would be successful. In terms of the next big thing and things that we need to focus on, I think energy is paramount in my mind. I'm going to talk about some of those things this evening. But we're, as a country, we represent about 5% of the world's population, but we use about 25% of the world's energy. There are a lot of countries and places around the world that are yet to go through an industrial revolution. Unless we want continued wars and strife, all people have to progress. Else you have a bunch of haves and have-nots, and that sets the stage for conflict. Right. We're obliged to share the wealth and bring everybody along. In that process, if we don't find energy sources that are renewable and friendly to the environment, we will literally destroy ourselves, because we can't afford for the rest of the world to put the levels of CO2 into the environment, consume fossil fuels to the extent that we have. It just won't work. I think we're now all, after a period of denial, and I think the denial is finally starting to subside, but nobody wanted to talk about global warming. It's right. Been it's like political poison. Nobody wants to mention it. But now, that the politics are sort of subsiding, people saying, okay, look at what's going on in the environment. We're having all this weird weather. What's going on, and what can we do about it? Those are real problems. So I think having engineers trained by this institution and others who can tackle those kind of problems, I think, is where we need to focus.
Let me ask, since you are both engineers, what type of mind, what type of, I guess, energy, curiosity goes into being an engineer? Can you tell in childhood that this person has those qualities? How does one become that engineer who invents?
I'm motivated to say something to you like engineers are people too.
But very special.
I have that similar saying I say about professors. I say professors are people too when I try to encourage students to go ahead and talk to people. But the professors are people too. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, both people give me an answer.
Well, go ahead.
I can talk about my experience. Obviously,
probably be very similar to mine.
Yeah, as far back as I can remember as a child, I've always been interested in knowing how things worked. I've been a tinkerer. I like to build things, and as I became better and better at it, it gives you I want to say somewhat of a sense of power, because it's maybe a crude way of applying mind over matter. You have a vision for something. You want to have this inanimate thing actually do a function. And you have to make all the parts to put it together and have it accomplish what you had in mind. What you envision can become reality. And that's the power of engineering that at least gets me excited.
I'd say very similar things, that innate curiosity, how things work, and also I'll say the courage to find out. Growing up, I was taking everything apart in the house,
I imagined that both of you.
and figuring out how things worked, but also I could fix anything too. So anytime anything was broken, and sometimes I don't even know how I did it. It just would be fixed. But that curiosity and the willingness to kind of get your hands dirty, that's another thing I think is a trait. But also realizing that all these things that you have to do to become an engineer, those are tools, mathematics and,
Right.
the other things, those are tools that you must master in order to be able to do it. But at the very heart of it is creativity. And if you can take the creativity and turn it into tangible, real things, it takes all those tools that you learn to be able to do that. So, those are some of those basic things.
I think that, what engineers are today is very different from what they were in the past. And it's been a continuous evolution, obviously, as in most fields. But I think it's fair to say that engineering is a field that is very far-reaching in its impact, because if it were not for engineers, we'd all be still living in caves. We wouldn't have, even chairs. Everything you can think of, somebody had to conceive of it and make it. And then once that's in place and you have something to build on and take it to the next level. Right now, a lot of the circuitry that you at one point it was, when semiconductors came along, it was individual transistors, and then all of a sudden individual transistors were made on a single chip, where the chip, what we call an integrated circuit, where you have a lot of transistors that did a specific function. Now those chips are now integrated into a larger chip, still very small, and now you have multiple functions on a single chip. So now when you look at a cell phone, a single chip in the phone may be the whole radio. Another chip might be the GPS. So individual chips now are doing functions that it used to take a lot of single parts to do. So it all builds on itself in that sense. So as we get more sophisticated, we still, and so and the other thing that's intriguing about it all is that it's moving faster and faster.
Right.
It's just more and more accelerated.
Well, that was a question. Why you think it even is moving in that direction? Why move towards smaller and faster? Why not have moved to bigger and more power?
Bigger and better.
I know it sounds almost like a silly question, but that's is it about conservation of energy? What drives us to the point where we want smaller things that work more quickly.
What's funny about the question, I think, is kind of like, well, what drove us from, scribbling writings on concrete tablets to printed paper and books where you had lots of pages that were very thin and better printing, so that your print could actually get smaller and get more information on a smaller thing. What's funny when you think about that philosophically, printed works was a way of storing information outside the human brain. Before that, it was history and information was passed down by word of mouth, and so you had people in a village, for example, who would be the historian, who would pass the information and train another so it was by memory. But then we discovered how to store information outside of us. Now we've discovered how to think beyond ourselves. We've got brains now. We're not quite artificial intelligence yet, but we're getting there. I mean, we're getting the ability to think outside of our own. So, who knows?
What the world holds.
It's exciting to think about. I'd like to stay around as long as I can so I can see where they all go.
Right. So live to be 100 and just see all that change that takes place.
Right. Because a lot of change can happen in a short amount of time. Next 20 years could see a enormous change in how we do things.
That's right.
Exactly. Now, starting with the speaker series, what are some of the things that you'll be sharing with students and with others as you do the speaker series and try to reach out and make a difference?
Well, we want to introduce students to grander ideas, bigger ideas, not only inventiveness, which will kind of be at the heart of what Dr. Johnson will be talking about, but also thinking beyond the small but expanding worlds that they have. As their worlds are expanding, we introduce to more and more. As I said before, this community we live in is a vibrant, eclectic one, and a lot of intellectual power just resides within this community. As we expand even that beyond this region, we would like to expose our students to that kind of idea. So we want to be able to bring people in of this caliber to be able to share those ideas and those experiences and the processes you've gone through in order to get to this place. And somebody might sit there in that audience and say, I think I could do that too. And that's part of what we're trying to do for the students.
You get to see the role models.
You get to see,
and that it's possible.
That it's possible, and because that's the purpose for a role model, is to know that something is possible, that someone else did something or to give you ideas for something, maybe even grander, greater. Or, we don't know who's sitting out there listening, and that's the exciting part. Because we might be able to look back on this. Someone may say, you know what, something you said in that talk just triggered something in me, and who knows what they may do and come back. I always like that when students or someone come back 10 years, something later, and say, you don't even remember you said this.
Right.
Yeah,
but, so that's the kind of thing which we're hoping to do.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Dr. Johnson, role models for you. Did you have role models growing up that inspired you?
Well, my first role model was my father. He used to repair things around the house, and whenever he was working on something, I was always there and always curious about what he was doing. So yeah, over the years, I once heard an expression, see if I can't reconstruct it real time. Think of the greatest person, or someone that you really, really admire and have a great deal of respect and admiration for. And the rest of that concept is that you are as great as that person because else you could not appreciate the qualities that they have. So being able to see what you want to be in reality clearly, brings it home and makes that next step in the process of becoming that person, one step at a time, baby steps, so to speak, and getting there. You know, just listening to you, I was thinking about when I was in high school and had aspirations for becoming an engineer, and took an engineering test that was sponsored by this science club. And the results came back discouraging. Said that recommended that I become a technician instead because I didn't have the ability to become an engineer.
Okay.
And so, you know, those naysayers and the discouragement is always there. And if I had bought into that, you know, then
So what kept
things,
you from not buying into that? What was it?
I never really thought about it. I never really thought. I just didn't give any credibility to the test because, you know, I was pretty clear about what I wanted to do. Clearly, when you are going off or charging off into the unknown, you always charge off with apprehension. So when I left Mobile going to Tuskegee, I had heard stories about a lot of, in fact, I talked to other people. I'd had a summer job with some people who had tried to go to Tuskegee, gone for a while, but ended up back in Mobile. And so I had been around all summer some people who had actually not been successful at what I was going off to do. One of the other things that made a difference, though, was that same science club in my senior year had a science fair, or regional science fair. It was actually held at the University of Alabama. And I had worked on a science project that I call Lonnie the robot. This was back in 1968. And so this was just a few years after Governor Wallace had stood in the door at the University of Alabama and said that no black students would come to that university. So not only did I win first place at the science fair and beat all of those other kids that this science club said could become engineers.
Right. And I'm sure it felt very good.
So that was a real moral victory.
I've seen that,
as well as a literal one.
Right.
I've seen that picture. I wonder, is there somewhere we could show that? Is that was that on your website, or was that in the office?
That's in the office. I'm wondering if I have it somewhere handy. I'm not sure I do.
What was the robot's name?
Lonnie. It was my alter ego.
Yeah.
But this was back in '68. You know, people were still had vacuum tubes back in that time frame, and so having a robot was it was and Linux was a tall robot.
Okay.
And he was remote controlled and programmable, and so it was like no contest.
All right. So he was the beginning, and you've kept going ever since. Well, gentlemen, do you have any words of wisdom that you want to share with our audience as we wrap up our interview? Any words of wisdom?
I think the important thing is about sharing information and ideas. That's the most powerful thing that we can give to each other, our ideas. And this is a way to do it. Having conversations like this is a way to do it. Having new, fresh minds come here to the Hill and learn about these STEM areas is a way to do that as well. So I just want to see that continue to happen.
Okay. And congratulations on the speaker series and getting it underway.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Johnson.
I have one word of wisdom.
Okay.
Perseverance.
Okay.
Perseverance is the one thing that makes a difference. The people sometimes in conversations will call me lucky. You were really lucky to have this happen, that happened. And my experience is that Lady Luck, she frowns just about as much as she smiles.
Right.
In the end, it's what you do that makes a difference.
Oh, wonderful. I have a book, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it's called There's No Such Thing as Luck. So I'm going to read it now.
Okay.
Well, I certainly have enjoyed talking with both of you.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed this as well.
Look forward to the series and being there this evening to see the presentation.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully, as we have more people coming through, we come in here and sit with you and have another discussion.
Looking forward to that as well. Okay, thank both of you. This is News from the Hill. I've been talking to two gentlemen who have a lot of things that they are doing, reaching out and touching others, making changes in the world. I'm Elizabeth Sloan-Ragland, and thank you so much for watching News from the Hill from the beautiful campus of Alabama A&M University.
We begin a regular monthly feature called How I Made My Millions. We went to Atlanta and met a man named Lonnie Johnson, who had once worked as an engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. What he did next made him wealthy beyond his wildest dreams.
Well, this is my laboratory.
Johnson was experimenting on a new kind of heat pump in his bathroom, of all places, when a blast of water suddenly shot out of a nozzle.
And the stream of water was so powerful that it set up air currents in the bathroom, and I thought to myself, geez, it would make a neat water gun. And at that point, I decided, well, you know, why don't I put the high-tech science stuff on hold for a while and go work and see if I could develop a toy, something that anybody could appreciate. So it was about a year later that I actually had my first working gun. And that was basically how the Super Soaker came to fruition.
Pulling the trigger actually opens the valve and allows the compressed water to go from the tank into the nozzle like this.
Of course, I wanted to create a business around this. I was going to manufacture it and sell it and make a whole bunch of money.
After 7 years and a lot of rejection, Lonnie found a company, Laramie Toys, that was willing to market his squirt gun on steroids.
It was in 1989 when I first met the people at Laramie. We started working together to implement a production model, something that could be manufactured. A few months later that I saw the final gun, it was just exciting for me to see that the thing was really turning into a product that was going to go to the market. The problem then became one where we were talking about a gun that was basically about $10 to $14. And people were used to paying $1 or $2 for a water gun. There was no advertising. We put them in the stores, and then we watched to see what happened, and they just blew out right away. I started to see the royalty check start to ramp up, and I got my first really interesting check, and I looked and I said, wow, this is doing okay. Laramie was being pushed to run TV commercials. The gun was put on TV, and it blew out again. The demand was so much, the production companies could not keep up with it. And then I got my next royalty check where I had to stop and sit down because it was a lot more than, and when I saw it, I realized my life had changed permanently.
Did it ever? Johnson's gamble paid off big time to the tune of $1 billion in sales and counting. Assuming an inventor's royalty of a few percent, Lonnie's paycheck to date is in the very cushy neighborhood of $20 million.
I knew Super Soaker from the beginning would be a great toy, but in terms of how that translated into dollars, I was just not prepared for it. So I had to sit down for a few minutes and kind of realize the potential impact that that would have on my life.
What did Lonnie Johnson do with his millions? He bought something he'd always dreamed of, a new lab. He returned to his roots and dove back into serious scientific research.